I want to preface this with a brief discussion of how Hearthstone nerfs cards. In Hearthstone, two things affect your card collection. The first is nerfs. This is when the text, mana cost, attack, or other stats of the card is altered. And, for a brief period of time, generally 2 weeks, you have the ability to disenchant the card at full disenchant value. This means you get back what you spent to craft the card. This is a good system. The second system is when a standard legal card or a basic or classic card is rotated into the Hall of Fame. Recently, this happened with Baku the Moon Eater and the other even and odd cards. But this also applies to when classic and basic cards, that is, rotate into the Hall of Fame, such as Sylvanas or Ragnaros. When this happens, you get the full crafting cost of the card automatically. So this actually puts you in the unique position where, if you wanted to and have superfluous dust, you could craft a golden copy of the card, then disenchant it after you've gotten the crafting cost back. This means you have the unique opportunity of making a little bit of dust. This, too, is a good system. Why did I bring up Hearthstone? Because this is the only consumer advocate-friendly way of nerfing or banning cards. It can only exist in the digital ecosystem. For instance, in Yu-Gi-Oh!, there is no disenchant value. You can't rip up your old ultra rares and craft a new common. Same thing within Magic. You just can't get your old cards to turn into new cards in the physical card game. So one of the ban lists that happens is at the most basic level is you lose access to your cards with no way of replacing the physical product that you own. I think that is a fundamental problem that affects so much of the game. It has a huge financial cost affiliated with it, because you spent money, and now you've suddenly lost money, and it's not just the cards that were immediately banned. Especially because some cards could rotate off the banned list at some point. But you lose the auxiliary pieces to combos. You got Felidar Sovereign, Saheeli Rai. Well, if you ban one of the cards, then the other loses its ability in the combo, and it loses a lot of its value. This is a real big problem with ban lists, and in Yu-Gi-Oh!, when we don't even have set ban list states, it can remove so much consumer confidence, because you don't know which cards to use, which cards to invest in. I do think that the notion of investing in a card game is a little bit silly in itself. These are pieces of paper with fiat currency value that fluctuates on a dime. It is quite difficult to assign merit to anyone that invests in the card game. That being said, there is a certain feeling, an unease around when the ban list might drop, or if your favorite deck is going to be threatened by it. I think there's real suspicion against Konami, in particular, against the motives for banning cards. And it just seeps into play to create such an unstable and disjointed environment. But why? Why do we have these ban lists? Well, the ban lists are actually pretty beneficial for the game, too. We forget that ban lists stop degenerate strategies. These are the FTKs, the OTKs, the Magic games, which only last a handful of turns, usually with combos like Splinter Twin. These are not engaging games. They're not fun. They're really polarized. They're really hard to win. You either sit down and lose, or you sit down and have an unfun experience. Binary win condition is just not good, especially when your opponent just stalls and tries to assemble the combo. It's really upsetting. Now, degenerate strategies are not just FTKs. There are certain decks that exist in Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic that are just too cumbersome to play in a real match. We have Lantern Control, which really should be banned. We had Eggs in Magic, which got banned. And then we have Draw Go. I know there's quite a lot of examples. Currently, we have quite the degenerate strategy with Teferi right now. Nexus of Fate, Approach of the Second Sun. There's a good number of these decks that are just not fun to play against. This is one of the benefits of the Banlist, to try to not just balance the format to give other decks a chance, but to make the game more engaging, because at the end of the day, the game should be fun for the vast majority of players, although some of the players should also have a good competitive environment. On the same note, the ban list in Yu-Gi-Oh!, for instance, has a particular penchant for removing cards which can stop the game in a tie. We have cards like Self-Destruct Button, Last Turn, the Old Ring of Destruction. All sorts of these cards could stop the game in a tie, and that's just not fun for either player. I know there are cards in Hearthstone that end in a tie. You can draw a card and deal damage at the same time in Paladin, for instance, with Hammer of Wrath. And that can end the game in a tie, and that's okay. Hellfire does symmetric damage, so in the right circumstance, you can end in a tie. But in Hearthstone, it doesn't feel like a big deal, because both players walk out without either a loss or a win, and it's okay. And I don't mind that so much, because the time that it takes in Hearthstone is really fast compared to Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic, especially when you could have an hour-and-a-half long Magic game. It just removes that sense of accomplishment and that well-structured pace. When you're fighting your opponent to the good fighting rhythm, where you're exchanging blows, or you're in a drag race, or you're punching and counter-punching. They play a card, you counter it. You play a card, they use their kill spell. You're going pretty even, the board state is good, and it's exciting, the game is engaging. This is the level playing field, and it's sort of an act of idealism. It is hard to ever approach that perfect balance where you and your opponent are consistently evenly matched. It's a fallacy to say that it can exist outside of very, very narrow formats, but maybe with the right ban list, you could make it more likely. Have those solved formats where there is a good amount of deck variety, several different well-competing meta decks that are teched out to have a good engaging experience. I do think this is one of the times where floodgates and restrictive game design are really the sin that is on the table. It's hard to argue that Royal Decree, Imperial Order, Jinzo, Majesty's Fiend, Vanity's Emptiness, all sorts of these polarizing cards are really good for the game, but they're necessary for the game just by the way it's done. There's so much focus on special summoning and special card effects, and the game is ridiculously fast that we need to run main-decked floodgates and hand traps, and the ban list can help where these floodgates can't. They can remove problematic cards, and even preemptively. I know Gishki had a hand loop, but that got removed before the cards were even printed. That's pretty valuable, as it increased the enjoyment for the players. Ban lists are a mixed bag, though. On one hand, you have the benefits of helping players to enjoy the game more. On the other hand, you have not being able to use the cards that you purchased, especially when they're one of your favorite. Can you imagine being a little kid, opening up a booster pack, getting your first ultra rare, and it's Chaos Emperor Dragon, and it's a fantastic experience. You're so excited. You're over the moon. And then you go to your friend, and he won't let you play because Konami says it's too powerful. Even though in your deck you have 2 copies of a light card and 2 copies of a dark attribute card, and you maybe summon Chaos Emperor Dragon once in 50 games, but it's too powerful on the competitive level. is just that weird experience. I'm not sure if there is a solution to the ban lists, outside of course, printing less cards to go on it in the first place. I know Magic Standard, that has been a consistent problem. Smuggler's Copter was just not designed for Standard. It's all those little plants for Modern and for Legacy. It's just weird how they structure it. I don't know. I'm probably going to do a full video explaining the complicated interests of the ban list, how it drives for economics. There's a financial incentive for Konami and other companies to sell new cards, and if the old cards retain their power level, then it's difficult to incentivize players to buy the new cards. It's a debacle, to be honest. There's quite a bit of things all competing with fun, engagement, competitive balance, and of course, money. One day. And now, a word from our sponsors.
Can I have some sweetness? Can I see your beauty?